Right. Hey, Special Ops members, let's have a quick chat about something which I think you'll find interesting. So, I've been having over the last week some one on ones with some of you guys, and it's been really good. I mean, I learn as much of these things as you do. I'm always refining the process to some degree and learning new insights. So, it was a really good week. I had a couple of good sessions I want to share with you because I think they'll help you when you're going through, particularly steps number 2 and 3. So, once you've this whole process is about building a fishing rod to catch the type of fish and projects that you want to catch, right? And it doesn't mean you can't have other fishing rods. It just means you're building one fishing rod at a time to identify a particular type of project or client or mix that you want to catch. So step number 2 is around selecting what type of projects and clients do I want, and how am I going to position myself as number 1. And 3 is about communicating the value. Now, sometimes the easiest thing is just to give you some examples. Now, let's have a look at number 3, where we're going to look to communicate the value. And here we go. Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 examples here. And the first one was Shao, who is a commercial company, and their focus was educational institutions who were purpose driven. Okay, nice tight niche for building a particular fishing rod. Doesn't mean you can't do other type of projects, but in terms of going out and getting these people, great, we need a fishing rod or a marketing system that can go and get those type of people, right? So we need a problem, because you can't just turn up and say, I'm an architect. So as we discussed it, he said it's really hard to get into these institutions. They're often working with someone else. Well, of course. So these institutions have got to have a reason to talk to you. They've got to have a reason to use you, right? So they're not going to change and start using you, particularly these big organizations that might have pre-established relationships. They're not going to start talking to you unless there's a really good reason to. So the best reasons to get in the door is they have a problem that you've identified, right? Or that they can at least agree with and go, yeah, I didn't even realize I had that problem. Okay. So after discussions with Shao, we talked about it, and he felt the biggest problem they had is a lot of these big institutions have a lot of projects going on, and they're not always coordinated. You have different departments looking to do different work within, let's say, a university. Okay, so we've got to flesh this out, this problem. We've got to explain the problem in greater detail. We can't just say, you've got a lot of ad hoc projects. So I haven't done this in huge detail, but you do need to think about what are the consequences and what are the costs that this problem that you're proposing has. And it's got to be one that they can identify with and agree with, right? So one of the consequences of ad hoc construction projects is there could be a lot of waste. Like you're double handling on things. People are going and spending lots of money, and, we could have just built that into the other one, right? A large amount of waste. Ideally, you'd go into more specific examples than this. I'm just giving very high level. But, the projects the projects en masse become a bit disjointed, and there's infighting because everybody wants access to resources and all those type of things, right? Now, I don't know the situation specifically, but I would get more specific than this, but we do need to explain the consequences. And then if you can give examples, because you're in that world where people have spent more money than they probably should have if they had some sort of coordinated solution. Okay, so the answer is, notice it's not that we're great designers and we're brilliant at designing for mission-driven educational institutions. What we've decided to do is go back to the LCC, because that's easier to talk about the value of. Right, so this is a big thing. For a lot of you, it's really hard to say, I'm a better designer, right? If you're going to differentiate yourself on design, it's really hard to do. But that's where the benefit of the LCC comes in, and you can talk about the benefit of the LCC solving early problems. Much easier to communicate because the scope of the LCC is much smaller, and because it's smaller and it's there to do a specific job, it's there to reduce the risk and make sure there's better design. That's easier to talk about. Okay, so in this case, what we've said here is, what does the solution do that addresses this problem of ad hoc, projects going on all over an educational institution? Well, this master plan takes the big picture in mind, and maybe that's, part of that is about the brand. What is the brand of this? Let's say it's university. What's the brand of this thing? What are we trying to say to students? How do we want students to feel about us? Therefore, our projects should reflect that brand. Like, our buildings should reflect the message we're trying to convey about who we are. So you can take a really big picture approach. You can align everybody, and then you talk about the project. Now, I'm not sure this is how they do their project, but I'm just putting these down as examples. So in 4 hours, we can come up with some aligned plan where we get all the stakeholders in a room, we establish a brand, the priorities, and we form one document that's going to be the master plan that maps out everything. Now, maybe it takes more than 4 hours, and maybe you can't just do one workshop. I don't know. I'm just saying that as an example. But that would be an example of mapping out the process of a master plan. Right? In 4 hours, you can go from not knowing what you're doing to what you're doing. So just to we put this together. Now, this was his original after our discussion. Shao put this together, which is pretty good. It's kind of wordy, so I changed it. So, we help mission-driven educational institutions who are frustrated with transformation of existing campuses, go from ad hoc decision-making and providing band-aid solutions for ever-changing campus demands to proactive, visionary, real-time thinking for creating sustaining next-generation learning environments using our research-based living master plan program without upsetting ongoing campus operations. Whoa, that's a big mouthful, right? That's one sentence. I can't remember what we were talking about at the start of the sentence, right? So what I've done here is taken the good ideas that are in here and just tried to break that down into something a bit simpler to get my head around, right? I had to simplify it for myself. So here's how I did it, and I'm not saying this is the best way or the way they're going to use or anything. It's just my example of dumbing it down. Right. Planning to fail or failing to plan, right? Too many campuses have ongoing construction projects and are spending large sums of money, enough to create something really special, but have a lack of a coordinated approach. And now I'm talking about the consequences. Ad hoc decision-making, double spending, and conflicting agendas end up being fed at the same time or appeased. We've got all these things going on. Any bigger picture that could make a campus world-class is never crystallized, and the opportunities are squandered in a series of one-off projects. Okay, imagine there was a way to bring everyone together under a grand plan. Our master plan workshop transforms frustrated mission-driven educational institutions. Imagine all strategic objectives, brands, timelines, and priorities agreed and documented. Imagine all decisions being made to enhance your bigger picture mission or your brand. Imagine all departments and stakeholders finally singing from the same song sheet. Imagine all departments and stakeholders singing from the same song sheet. Imagine your world-class campus being the reason people come to your institution. Imagine achieving this impossible in only 4 hours. And then there's nothing like a little good, visual here. Okay, so not perfect, but we're moving in the right direction, and I'm meeting Shao again this week just to, fine-tune this a little bit more. Okay, so just to review what we've done here, one is rather than he's trying to break into mission-driven educational institutions. How are we going to do it? We're not going to do it by saying we're better at doing those type of projects than anyone else. That's a hard ask to try and claim and prove and have someone else believe. But what we can say, which is a lot easier, is listen, if you're in the early stages, or if you've got ongoing projects and they're a bit of an ad hoc and you feel that they're not aligned, we run this process called a master plan workshop, and we'll get everything aligned. It'll be one document, and from there you'll have everyone aligned, all the stakeholders will agree to priorities, and all the arrows will be pointing in the same direction. Right? Now, they can do that even if they don't intend to use you. This is an aligning exercise. You're not selling construction. It's an alignment exercise. But if you get in the door to do the alignment exercise up front, then you've got a good chance, don't you? At least it's a way to get in the door for Lee Shao, to get in the door and deal with these organizations and add some value up front and get paid for it. Okay? So, like I say, not perfect, but moving in the right direction. So hopefully you can do something with that. Right. So from a positioning point of view, just going back to this, I've tried to explain the value of not them as a designer, but of their LCC. Right. So we've selected the audience and we're really focusing on the LCC as the door opener. Okay. Cool. Right. That was a commercial one. Let's have a look at Michael. And Michael was a bit different. Michael, who was he dealing with? He said, I want to go and fish for luxury high-end residential. And, okay, cool. Then we need a problem. And actually it was about not luxury high-end residential. It was, but it was waterfront high-end luxury residential. Okay. So I said, what's the one thing, in the $1 million message, which is kind of what I did with Lee Shao as well. It was the $1 million message was the structure we used, and then I did adapt it and change it around. You don't have to stick to that structure, but once we collected all the data. So I said, what's the secret weapon or superpower or secret ingredient that you have, Michael? And he said, I reckon it's that I form a team. That's the thing. And we discussed that. And so I said, all right, well, to say that you form a team sounds good, but what we need to do is establish the problem in a way, once again, same as Lee Shao, that the client goes, yeah, I recognize that problem, you're right. Or that could be, I can see that would be a problem. I haven't done many renovations or work myself. So we talked about the idea of, he felt his biggest asset that he bought was this bringing an A team together. So I said, all right, we need some words to crystallize that so an owner can go, yeah, that's me, or that could be me, right? Now, so the problem is that too many of these construction teams, and a team he is defining as the architect, the contractor, and the owner, right? We have three pieces to this team here. And too many of these teams are a B or a C team, right? They're not A teams. Why are they not an A team? Because the architect's not a specialist, right? So he can talk about the fact that he's a specialist in waterfront luxury high-end homes. The owner, of course, is not going to be a specialist in this. They're not going to be an A player, right? So that's obvious. And the contractor might not be an A player in terms of forming this team for this particular type of project. They may be an A player in different type of projects, but not waterfront homes because they're different. They're special. They're unique. They're hard. Okay, so the consequence is you end up with a B or a C result, right? Project goes over time and over budgets, and it would be really good to have some stats around projects that go over time and on a budget, and it would be really good to have some stats that pull this down to a dollar figure if things don't go well. And his premise is it's because you've got a C team, right? One of the players or two of the players, you want three A players. That's the solution. The solution is you have 3 A players. Your right architect, right contractor, an A architect, A contractor, and the client isn't going to be probably an A player. And you explain that because you don't do this every day. But you need to be coachable so that I can turn you into an A player within this team because you need to be an A player. And I would even talk about the fact that the number one risk with me is, look, I'm an A player. I know who the A contractors are. I know who they are. The number one risk we have is that the client, you're not an A player, and so therefore you need to be coachable. And I'll coach you. How do we do it? Well, we have this thing called a playbook. And this is a playbook for all of us to make sure we're all A players. And in the playbook, we'll work out what everyone does. Everyone has their roles. So it's probably better to say, what the roles are, what I do and what I don't do, what you do, what you don't do. Right? What you do, the action list. So it's very important to say, here's what here's what I do, here's what I don't do, here's what here's your role as the architect, as the owner. But this is not your role. These things are not your job. These aren't your roles. You need to keep your fingers out of the, stay in your lane, and you map out all the roles. It's all mapped out in this playbook. And there's rules of the road. Here's how we're going to communicate. Here's how we're going to resolve issues. Here's what happens if you create risk. I'll kick you in the backside, right? And I want your permission up front to kick you in the backside if I need to, right? So from Michael's point of view, his point of difference, how is he going to say I'm better than anyone else? It's because the reason I'm better is because I end up with A projects. And why do I end up with A projects? Is because I make sure we've got an A team. How do I do that? Well, I'm an A player for your type of project. I make sure we get the right contractor, right? I can give you options, but they'll all be A options. And I train you to be an A client. Okay, that's how we do it. The problem is most projects don't have A teams. Okay, that's what makes me different, right? If you want a B team, no problem. I may be a little more expensive, but I'm bringing my A game to a project like yours. So, how is Shao different? They get the projects off on the right foot. They align everything and everybody in a complex, interoperable situations where maybe everybody's not aligned, right? That's the LCC. Michael's not doing the LCC. He's talking about how he runs a project. Okay, both these situations they've both got something to talk about. They've both got problems that they can go in and say, these are problems, and hopefully get some of the people nodding. And for those who nod their head and go, makes sense, that is a problem or it could be a problem, they've now got a solution explained in a way where someone goes, that makes sense, right? So, bit of a rant, but hopefully it just adds value to sort of step number 2 and 3, where we need to know who we're talking to, because once we know who we're talking to in step number 2, we've got specific about that niche that we're targeting, we can then go and solve some problems. And that's where value comes from, is solving expensive problems for people. Okay, but if we're too broad in who we're talking about, then we can't really identify any specific problem that's relevant or meaningful to the target audience. Okay? Cool. Hope that helps. Look forward to seeing you on the one-on-ones. And this is how we roll. That's how we do it.